Have you ever noticed this? The kindest person in the room is rarely the one people rely on most. You try to be understanding, patient, available. You avoid conflict. You try not to upset anyone. And for a while, people appreciate it. But over time, something strange starts happening. People stop respecting your boundaries. They stop taking your words seriously. Some even trust colder people more than you. Why? Because people don't just look for kindness. They look for stability. And stability feels safer than kindness ever will. Most people grow up believing that kindness naturally earns trust. Be nice to people. Be supportive. Be understanding. And people will value you. But real life doesn't always work that way. You've probably met someone who was warm, generous, endlessly accommodating. Yet somehow, people constantly ignored them, overstepped them, took advantage of them. Then you meet someone else. Less emotional, more reserved, maybe even intimidating. And people trust them almost immediately, not because they're more kind, but because they feel stable, predictable, grounded. And human beings are drawn to emotional stability instinctively, especially in uncertain environments. This is the part most people misunderstand. Kindness makes people feel good temporarily. Stability makes people feel safe consistently. And those are not the same thing. Kindness sounds simple, but in reality, people interpret it very differently. Sometimes, kindness is seen as warmth, sometimes as generosity, but very often, it gets interpreted as weakness, especially when kindness has no boundaries attached to it. Let's make this real. You become the person who is always available, always helping, always understanding, always adjusting for everyone else. A friend calls late at night, you answer. Someone needs help, you say yes. Someone crosses a line, you let it slide. At first, people appreciate it. You seem easy to be around, safe. But slowly, the dynamic changes. People begin expecting your flexibility. Your patience becomes normal. Your boundaries become invisible. And without realizing it, you stop looking kind. You start looking emotionally negotiable. That's where the problem begins. Because people trust boundaries more than endless accommodation. Think about it. Who feels more reliable? Someone who says, "Whatever you want is fine," or someone who calmly says, "No, that doesn't work for me." The second person feels more stable, not harsher, not colder, just more grounded. And human beings naturally trust grounded people more, because predictable behavior creates psychological safety. This is why excessive kindness often backfires, not because kindness is bad, but because people start questioning your center, your limits, your ability to hold your position under pressure. And once people stop believing you have boundaries, they stop fully respecting them. This is where many people become confused. They think, "But I'm treating people well." And they are. But treatment alone doesn't create trust. Consistency does. Emotional control does. Stable behavior does. Because kindness without structure becomes unpredictable. You don't know when the person actually means yes. You don't know when they're uncomfortable. You don't know where their limits are. And strangely, that uncertainty makes people trust them less. Kindness matters. But without stability, it starts dissolving into approval seeking. And people can feel the difference immediately. There's something most people never notice about trust. Trust is not built only through kindness. It's built through predictability. People need to feel like they understand how you will respond, how you behave under pressure, how you react when things go wrong, whether your emotions stay consistent. Because uncertainty creates tension, and human beings instinctively avoid emotional unpredictability. Think about the people you trust most. Usually, they're not the loudest, not the most emotional, not even the warmest. They're the people who stay grounded. The people who don't suddenly explode, don't collapse under pressure, don't change personalities every day. Their stability makes other people relax. Now compare that to someone emotionally inconsistent. One day they're supportive, the next day they're distant. One moment calm, the next reactive. Even if they're kind, people slowly stop feeling secure around them, because emotionally unstable behavior creates uncertainty, and uncertainty quietly destroys trust. Let's make this practical. Imagine two managers. The first manager is extremely nice, always joking, always trying to keep everyone happy, avoids tension constantly. But the moment pressure appears, they panic. Their mood changes. Their decisions become emotional. Their energy becomes chaotic. Now imagine the second manager, less expressive, more composed, not overly emotional. But when problems appear, they stay calm. They think clearly. They communicate directly. They remain emotionally steady. Who would most people trust in a crisis? Almost always, the stable one. Not because stability feels warmer, but because stability feels safer. And this pattern exists everywhere. Workplaces, relationships, friendships, leadership, families. People are constantly scanning for emotional safety. Not consciously, instinctively. This is why emotionally grounded people naturally attract authority, even when they say very little. Their nervous system communicates. Things are under control, and people respond to that immediately. Now, here's the part nobody says out loud. Sometimes excessive kindness creates emotional uncertainty, because people begin wondering, do you actually mean what you say? Are you hiding discomfort? Are you avoiding conflict to stay liked? Will your emotions eventually spill out later? That uncertainty weakens trust, not intentionally, but psychologically. People trust people whose behavior feels stable over time. That's the key. Not perfect people, not emotionless people, stable people. And this is where most people lose respect without realizing it. They focus so much on being liked that they stop becoming emotionally reliable. And the strange part is, people may appreciate your kindness while still trusting someone else more. Because appreciation and trust are not the same thing. People admire kindness, but they rely on stability. Watch what happens in moments of pressure. That's where people reveal who they trust. Not during calm moments, not during easy conversations, but during stress, conflict, uncertainty. Because pressure exposes emotional structure. Imagine two people in the same situation. A problem appears unexpectedly. The first person reacts immediately. Their voice changes. Their emotions rise. They become defensive, frustrated, overwhelmed. The second person pauses. They stay composed. They listen first. They respond carefully. Now, here's the important part. The second person may not actually be smarter. They may not even know more. But almost everyone in the room will instinctively see them as more capable. Why? Because emotional control creates perceived authority. Composure signals strength, even before competence is proven. This is something human beings respond to automatically. When someone remains emotionally stable under pressure, people assume they can handle responsibility, they can make decisions, they are safe to follow. And this happens fast, sometimes within seconds. This is why calm people often become leaders naturally, not because they dominate the room, but because they stabilize it. Now compare that to someone who constantly reacts emotionally. Even if they're intelligent, even if they're kind, people begin hesitating around them. Because emotional unpredictability creates doubt. You start wondering, how will they react today? Can they handle pressure? Will this become emotional? And once those questions appear, authority weakens immediately. This is where kindness alone starts failing, because kindness without emotional control can become unstable. You may care deeply about people, but if your emotions constantly override your judgment, people stop feeling anchored around you. And anchoring is what creates trust. Think about pilots during turbulence, doctors during emergencies, leaders during crisis. People don't look for the warmest person first. They look for the most composed one, the person whose emotional state says, I can handle this. That feeling changes everything. Now, this doesn't mean suppressing emotion. That's different. Emotional control is not emotional numbness. It's emotional discipline, the ability to feel pressure without becoming controlled by it. And people respect that deeply, even if they never say it directly, because stability under pressure is rare. Most people become reactive when emotions rise. So when someone remains grounded, it stands out immediately. Emotional reactions attract attention. Emotional control attracts trust. And in the long run, trust always holds more power. There's a point where kindness stops feeling generous and starts feeling uncertain. This is where many people unintentionally lose respect, not because they're bad people, but because they abandon their own structure trying to keep everyone comfortable. They avoid saying no, avoid disappointing people, avoid tension at all costs. And at first, this looks admirable. You seem patient, easygoing, understanding. But over time, people start noticing something else. Your boundaries keep moving. One day, something bothers you. The next day, you allow it. Sometimes you speak up. Sometimes you stay silent. Your reactions become difficult to predict. And unpredictability weakens trust. This is the strange paradox of excessive kindness. The more desperately you try to maintain harmony, the less emotionally stable you appear. Because people begin sensing that your behavior depends entirely on keeping others happy. That creates instability. Let's make this real. Imagine someone in a relationship who constantly says, "It's okay," even when it clearly isn't. They suppress frustration. They avoid confrontation. They tolerate behavior that crosses their boundaries. Not because they're comfortable, but because they fear conflict. For a while, the relationship feels smooth. No arguments, no tension, no resistance. But underneath, resentment starts building, silently. And eventually, the emotional pressure leaks out. Suddenly they explode over something small, or emotionally withdraw completely. And the other person becomes confused. Where did this come from? But the signs were always there. The instability was hidden inside the excessive accommodation. This happens in workplaces too. The employee who says yes to everything eventually becomes overwhelmed, burned out, quietly frustrated. And because they never established clear limits, people stop knowing where those limits actually are. That uncertainty changes how people treat you. Because stable people communicate boundaries consistently, not aggressively, not emotionally, clearly. That clarity creates reliability. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people use kindness to avoid rejection, to avoid tension, to avoid losing approval. But once kindness becomes driven by fear, it stops feeling grounded. People can sense it, even subconsciously. And this is why excessive kindness often creates the opposite result people hoped for. Instead of creating security, it creates uncertainty, because people trust individuals who can remain kind without abandoning themselves. That balance matters. A stable person can say, "I understand you," and still maintain boundaries calmly. That combination creates respect. Because now your kindness feels intentional, not dependent. If you abandon your boundaries to keep people comfortable, people stop trusting your boundaries entirely. When life becomes uncertain, people stop looking for the nicest person in the room. They start looking for the most stable one. This is something you can observe everywhere. During stress, during conflict, during pressure. Human beings instinctively move toward emotional certainty, because stability creates a feeling of safety. And safety is one of the strongest psychological needs people have. Think about moments of crisis. A project failing, a family emergency, a serious disagreement. In those moments, charm matters less. Warmth matters less. People pay attention to one thing. Who stays grounded when things become difficult? That person naturally becomes the emotional center of the environment, not because they demanded authority, but because stability creates trust automatically. Let's make this practical. Imagine turbulence on a flight. Passengers begin panicking. Now imagine two flight attendants. The first becomes visibly anxious. Their face changes. Their movements become rushed. Their voice becomes unstable. Immediately, everyone else becomes more nervous. Now imagine the second attendant. Calm posture, controlled voice, steady movements. Even if the situation hasn't changed, people instantly feel safer. Why? Because emotional stability spreads socially. Human beings constantly absorb emotional signals from each other. This is why stable people influence rooms quietly, without needing attention, without needing dominance. Their calmness regulates the emotional environment around them, and people remember that feeling deeply. This is also why emotionally grounded individuals often become leaders naturally, not because they speak the most, but because others feel psychologically safer around them. And here's the strange part. Many people mistake this for coldness. But stability is not emotional distance. It's emotional consistency. A stable person can still be caring, empathetic, supportive, compassionate. But their emotions do not control their behavior. That distinction changes everything. Because when someone remains grounded, people know what to expect from them. And predictability creates security. This is why stability often outperforms warmth in the long run. Because warmth creates comfort temporarily, and stability creates trust over time. And trust is what people rely on when things become uncertain. Now, this doesn't mean kindness is unimportant. It matters deeply. But kindness alone cannot hold relationships, teams, or leadership together. Because eventually, every relationship experiences pressure, and pressure exposes emotional structure. That's when people discover whether your kindness is actually grounded, or simply reactive. Warmth may attract people initially, but stability is what makes them stay. Now here's where people misunderstand this conversation completely. The goal is not to become colder, not to become emotionless, not detached, not intimidating. Because emotional distance is not the same thing as emotional stability. And many people confuse the two. They think, if kindness makes me vulnerable, then I should stop caring. But that creates a different problem. Coldness may create distance, but it rarely creates real trust. People might respect you temporarily, they might even fear you, but fear is unstable. Eventually, people stop feeling emotionally safe around someone who feels disconnected completely. So, the answer is not less empathy, less kindness, less emotion. The answer is structure, grounded behavior, emotional discipline. Because the strongest people are not the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who remain steady while feeling everything. That's real stability. Think about the people who have had the strongest presence in your life. Usually, they weren't perfect, but they were consistent. You knew where they stood. You knew how they would respond. You trusted their emotional center. And that trust changed how you experienced them completely. Now compare that to someone who constantly shifts depending on the situation. One day warm, another day distant, another day supportive, and another day emotionally reactive. Even if they care deeply, people struggle to relax around unpredictability. Because uncertainty creates tension internally. This is why emotional stability becomes powerful. It allows people to feel safe without needing constant reassurance. And that changes how they respond to you. They trust your words more. They respect your boundaries more. They rely on your presence more. Not because you became harder, but because you became grounded. This is also why stable people rarely need to chase authority. Their consistency creates authority naturally. And the strange part is, the calmer you become internally, the less you need validation externally. Because stable people are not constantly adjusting themselves to maintain approval. They can disappoint people calmly, disagree calmly, maintain boundaries calmly. And that emotional steadiness changes everything. This is the balance most people never learn. You can be kind, without becoming emotionally dependent on being liked. You can care deeply, without abandoning your boundaries. You can stay warm, without becoming unstable. And when you combine kindness with stability, people experience you differently, not just as pleasant, but as trustworthy, reliable, grounded. Kindness earns appreciation. Stability earns trust. Most people spend years trying to become more liked, more accepted, more agreeable. But trust works differently. People may enjoy kindness, but they rely on stability. Because stability creates emotional safety. And emotional safety is what human beings search for constantly. Not perfection. Not endless warmth. Stability. The ability to remain grounded under pressure. To maintain boundaries without aggression. To stay emotionally steady when situations become uncertain. That's what creates lasting trust. And once you understand that, you stop trying to earn value through endless accommodation. You start building emotional structure instead. Because in the end, kindness makes people feel good. Stability makes people feel safe. And people will always trust what feels safe most.